Let's see. I'm not sure if we are live. Okay, I think we are. So, welcome everybody to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. And I guess before we get going, just as a reminder, if you have any questions or any topics that you would like to discuss on these live streams, this is your time. So feel free to email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com. And yeah, let me know what question you'd like to have discussed and or what topic you'd like to have discussed, as well as a name that you'd like me to use on the air. So, welcome everybody. Jeff, Kevin, you and A. Hello. Happily ever after. Hello, hello. So, I have some kind of, well, it's really sad for me. Sad news. Um, one of, I just, one of the most amazing people I think ever to really walk this planet passed away October 20th, and that is James Randi. And I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but he is a hero of mine. And I just absolutely adored that man. And it just hurts my heart that he's gone. And it's weird to kind of grieve the loss of somebody that you've never met. Um, but he just was so amazing. And you can find his old videos. He had a show on the air. This was back in the day, probably back in the early 80s. Um, Wait, he had a show and it was all about exploring kind of supernatural things like psychic abilities or testing different kind of far out claims in general. Um, Telekinesis, just all kinds of uh, supernatural powers. And he just did it in such a respectful, scientific, uh, well mannered way that it was just fantastic. And uh, he was actually a former magician, and I believe he studied with Houdini. He was a magician, and he realized that how easily people could be fooled. And much like Houdini, who back in the day spent the last half of his life really working with people to try to um, explain different principles um, that were being used to kind of deceive people. So, like cold reading or just different like psychological kind of sleight of hand type things. So, both very interesting men. And James Randi just, yeah, did a lot of work with debunking things and helping people to avoid scams and just bringing a lot of awareness into this world. So, he will be missed. He's wonderful. His videos are fantastic. It's very interesting. So if you're not familiar with him, I encourage you to look him up on YouTube. Yeah, Critical Mass says, yeah, it's good that he's exposing these methods used by these con men. Absolutely. And what's interesting too is oftentimes in his videos, so some of these people were knowingly defrauding people. They were saying, "Oh, I can." Uri Geller was probably the most famous charlatan that James Randi kind of called out. And Uri Geller would go around saying that he had all these abilities, that he could bend spoons, and he was really gaining this huge following. And James Randi was showing this is actually how he goes about doing this. Um, and he worked with Johnny Carson to kind of defraud Uri Geller on the air during one of the episodes of The Tonight Show. So very interesting. But what was also interesting about that was that I would say there was probably about a good 95% of people that were on his show who truly believed that they had certain powers. And when he would kind of demystify, actually, no, this is what's psychologically going on. This is what's really going on here, and would try to get them to he just would lay it out in such a wonderful way, kind of here are the odds of probability, here's what would be considered higher than normal, kind of here's the psychology behind it, and all of this. And there were quite a few people who really truly thought that they had psychic abilities that either left feeling deeply kind of confused and kind of an identity crisis. And then there were those who were like, "Oh, no, no, I was just having an off day," or "Oh, my abilities don't work like that," or they would continue to justify it. So it was a very fascinating show. So, okay. Well, I know that was a little off topic, but um, I just love him, and um, yeah, he will be missed. So, um, okay, and let's see. I also wanted to mention podcasts. So if you can't make it to one of these live streams, or you want to save your data and not listen to YouTube while you're driving, you can download these live streams and many more by checking out our podcast. It's called Thrive After Abuse, and it's out there wherever you can find a podcast. So that might be something to consider checking out if you're interested. And let's see, one of the questions that I had emailed was actually from one of our moderators here. Uh, so, Jack Lumen, got your question. He says, "Hi, Dana. My question is as follows: how can I ask for what I need in public spaces, in particular, healthcare practices, and maybe even my kids' school? Currently, I had to put physical therapy for both Hufflemom and I on hold. The office manager and medical billing office gal was repeatedly pressuring us because we were taking more than an hour allotted by insurance. I had a huge emotional flashback the last time she pressured us because she put the screws to us just as we were walking in. Huffle called the physical therapy office, talked to an office worker that was not the woman doing the medical billing, but cushioned and hedged things a bit by explaining the tremendous pressure we were under, supporting our kids with remote learning for school due to the quarantine. We are in a small town, and many healthcare providers are not trauma informed. It's actually easier to ask for physical accommodations with my chronic pain. If it's something psychological like complex PTSD, most healthcare staff and professionals do not have a clue as to what I'm dealing with and can't always put things in the context of my nerve pain. I hope I got your email right. Thanks again. Uh, you may use my regular pseudonym and helpful moms too. We actually would like for the regular members of the chat to know that even the channel moderators struggle from time to time. So thank you, Jack, for being so transparent with that. And I think it is good for people to realize, that even the moderators, even myself, um, everybody, we all have our challenges and issues, and nobody has it figured out 100%. So I appreciate your transparency with that. It's I think kind of helpful for the new people here to realize. Um, as far as, let me pull up your question again. For asking for what you need, I think you did a good job of exactly that. So it sounds like you had your wife, who we referred to as Huffle Mom, um, talk to an office worker who was not the woman doing the medical billing, and tried to explain to her, kind of, here's our situation. We're doing the best we can. And, um, so advocating for yourself. So continuing to do what you're doing. I guess to break it down further, it would look like, um, going into a conversation and starting off with what you're needing, and doing so in a very calm, tactful way of letting the other person kind of know, like, this is the outcome that I'm looking for. This is what I'm needing. You know, uh, like, for example, if your office appointments take longer than an hour, letting her know, Yes, I'm very aware that you guys are busy and that insurance only allows for a certain time limit. We would love to be able to meet that time limit. Are there some certain things that we can do that would help, that would help both of us? Because we're moving as fast as we can during this process and during these appointments. Like the appointments just kind of take however long that they take. So it might mean you guys getting there, um, you know, 15, 20 minutes or more early and making sure that you're ready to go. So you're not, I don't know if you're getting there late or kind of what the situation is, but really making sure that you're allowing enough time. Um, and that's nice too for you because then that way you're not feeling rushed or pressured and it's a just a more smooth sailing type of appointment. And um, yeah, letting them know that you're aware of, yeah, these are the time constraints. We're well aware of that. But also here's kind of what's going on with us and here's what we're going to be doing on our end to respect, the time constraints that you guys have. So, um yeah. And then if somebody's, if she's if anybody really is kind of coming at you in an aggressive way, letting them know, like, I hear, just I hear that you're frustrated. Like, I get that you're frustrated and probably burned out. I think a lot of people are feeling that way. We're doing the best we can. We want to work together on this, so let's figure something out. Bricks and Feathers says, Dana, your microphone crackles on and off. I think it might be happening when you talk directly into it or if you're closer to it. Hmm. Is anybody else having the crackling issue? Thank you, Jack, for posting the email address. Yeah, if you have a question or a topic you'd like to discuss, you can email me, Dear Dana at thriveafterabuse.com. And um, oh, sure. UNA says, could we readdress the difference between ghosting and no contact? I spent the morning explaining the difference. Yes, we absolutely can. So, no, well, ghosting is, I think, becoming a more and more frequent thing, especially with online dating. It's basically where a person just loses interest for whatever reason and they just disappear. Yeah, it's rude and it's hurtful. Um, but that's really what it is. It's just a loss of interest. They're not gonna, they know that they're not going to get whatever it is that they're looking for, or um, it's just not a good fit for them. Ghosting, or excuse me, no contact is a defense strategy. So no contact is about self-protection. So um, if a person is dangerous or destructive to you in any way, shape, or form, and you get to the point where you're like, you know what, this is not healthy for me. This I don't this person, I don't feel safe around them, emotionally or physically or both, and I'm just done. I don't want them in my life. Then going no contact means that you're cutting off contact from them. You don't On their end, it might feel like ghosting because there's that cutting off of contact, but at the same time, you don't need to go into this like lengthy explanation explaining to a person why abusive behavior is not okay. And sometimes that's even the better strategy because these types of personalities can escalate quickly, and trying to do the right thing and be assertive and explain why it's not okay to, um, be hurtful or harmful is going to put a person in greater danger. So sometimes it truly is the most mature and the most reasonable strategy, self-protection strategy, to just completely cut off contact and block them across the board. So other people who have never encountered somebody who is who gives you the creeps or who has been abusive or dangerous or damaging in any way, they might not see it that way. And that's okay. They don't need to. So this is where it's important to look for that validation from inside of yourself and not looking for other people to agree with you. So if somebody has just really uncomfortable behavior, um, or they're hurtful or harmful, it's okay. It's okay to to not talk to them and to not explain why and to just block them. So I'm trying to think of some other. Oh, silent treatment. The silent treatment often gets lumped in there. There's confusion with that as well. And silent treatment is a grooming technique, and it's considered a form of verbal abuse. And the silent treatment, it's all about punishing the other person. And the message is, if you do this, then I'm going to make your life hell by not talking to you. And the result is the person that's getting the silent treatment, you feel like a sheet twisting in the wind. You don't know, is this relationship are they gonna reopen contact with me? What's gonna go, what's happening here? It causes a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. And uh, silent treatment is um, it's not a form of self-protection. It's a punishing, grooming type of behavior. So there's that difference there between no contact and silent treatment. So I also want to point out, this is not the same as refusing, or I guess distancing yourself from a conversation. A lot of targets of abuse get to the point where they just stop talking. And they're not doing it to try to punish the other person or um, teach them a lesson or any of that. They just realize, hey, you know what? Everything I say is wrong. And so I'm not going to add any more fuel to the fire. So I think I just need to stop talking, because no matter how solutions oriented I'm trying to be, I just seem to keep digging this hole deeper. It's like the other person just wants to fight. And so they stop talking. So those are some subtle yet important differences between these different forms of communication or non-communication. Does that help kind of clear things up? Yeah, ghosting. Um, there are similarities, or at least there can look like there's similarities between ghosting and silent treatment. It's just when a person falls off the radar, kind of a thing. With ghosting, they tend to not reopen communication. Silent treatment, it's a punishing behavior, and there generally is communication that's reopened. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Critical Mass says sometimes the silent treatment is a sign someone's been turned into a flying monkey by the narcissist smear campaign. They used to talk to you and suddenly they stop talking to you. Yeah, well, I think that would be more kind of ghosting, and it's for exactly the reasons that you're saying. They've heard some sort of half truth or complete lie about you, and that radically changes their opinion. Like, oh, you're abusive, or oh, you did X, Y, and Z. And they're like, whoa, I didn't realize that about this person. Okay, I'm done. And then they completely cut off contact. So it's more of a kind of a no contact strategy on their end, because they've heard that you're dangerous and destructive, even though it's not true. Let's see here. Let me scroll up. Benjamin asks, how common are female covert narcissists? Oh boy, that's a good question. Honestly, my guess would be it's just as prevalent as with men. Um, think about it in this way. It's a behavior, it's not a gender. And that level of just kind of self-absorption and selfish indifference towards others and cruelty, it, it can be anybody at any age and any walk of life, any religion, any nationality, any income level, any education level, I mean, gender, sexual orientation, you name it. So it's important to really see it as the behavior. So that way we don't have our blinders on thinking, "Oh, it's only men I have to worry about," or "It's only women I have to worry about," or "It's only lawyers that I have to worry about," or "It's only I don't know, Catholics or Geminis," or do you see what I'm saying? Because it's very easy when people start kind of learning about problematic behavior, our brain wants, not only wants, that's what it does. It sifts and sorts. It starts putting things in categories in order to understand something. Is it this or is it that? And how is this different from that? And th- that's important, but the problem with it, it can lead to a lot of faulty thinking and kind of hasty generalizations where we think, well, all X are Y, all men are pigs, all women are gold diggers, or do you see what I'm saying? All Geminis are two-faced, all Scorpios are drama, all attorneys are trouble. So but I guess that at the end of the day, it's most important to be able to spot problematic behavior for what it is, and knowing how to identify it and how to respond to it effectively and efficiently and quickly. Instead of because this kind of stuff flies under the radar of the vast majority of people. Most of us are taught a lot of very incorrect messages about relationships and how to get along with others. We're taught, oh, it's important you forgive and forget. And it's important you're not perfect either. And to have compassion. Maybe they had a bad day or a bad week or a bad childhood. Or, um, uh, oh, that's just, all women are like that. Or all men are like that. Or, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Um, all relationships take work. These kinds of things. So there's a lot of really toxic messages floating around out there that can be some really dangerous advice if it's not taken within the context of your healthy boundaries. And everybody's boundaries are different. This is why it's so important that that each person is able to know where their boundaries are and to know when they're being crossed and what that feels like. That's probably the biggest indicator, is what that feels like. So when we've had a boundary crossed, and I think, well, let me back up. I think one of the reasons feeling the boundary cross is more prominent than being able to like concretely point to it, is because we all, men and women both, have been socialized to kind of minimize and gloss over, to give excuses, to allow excuses for the bad behavior of other people. And that's so dangerous because then we're going through life with kind of these blinders on, thinking that things aren't that big of a deal, or we're going to wait around until we have concrete proof that something's actually a problem before we take action. And the problem with that is, if we've waited till something's a concrete, that we can concretely point to that and be like, this is hands down a problem, odds are we've waited too long. And it's a huge problem by then. And those problems are expensive and time consuming and can be very emotionally draining and exhausting and damaging and physically harmful. So, so paying attention to how you feel emotionally when a boundary's been crossed. This tends to surface as a variety of uncomfortable emotions: frustration, irritation, confusion. If it's kind of an on again, off again issue. It can also surface as anxiety, depression. I've heard a lot from quite a few people that they have anxiety, that they just have anxiety and that they don't know why, and that they must just have an anxiety disorder. And I would say the vast majority of the time when we start getting into it, there's very real reasons as to what's kicking off this anxiety. And it's not for no reason. It's for reasons that they're dismissing, basically, because they think, well, that's insignificant or I can't prove it. So therefore it can't because it's not provable, then therefore it shouldn't be an issue. But that's not how our brains and our bodies work. So our subconscious mind picks up everything, and if something's an issue, it's going to keep trying to get our attention. So thinking of our emotions in that way of, again, the vast majority of the time, we feel a certain way for a reason. It's not just out of the blue. And this goes hand in hand with this kind of cultivating a level of emotional intelligence, of figuring out what that message is and then diving into that. And again, this stuff's not taught, so it's a process. Uh, let's see here. Bella says, Dana, why do I shake and my heart races when seeing him at a distance and he doesn't even see me? I've been gone for 5 months. It's a fear response. It's that fight or flight. And this is, uh, I know it can feel very abnormal and confusing and unsettling to have this kind of response, but we all have, different defenses, and they all get triggered when, or I feel like that word triggered is so overused. They get activated when there's danger of any degree. And so thinking about it, prehistoric you would get activated when it saw a saber-toothed tiger, so there was that fight or flight of, saber-toothed tiger, gotta run, kind of a thing. It's that same kind of feeling. So when we're sensing danger, when we know this person has caused you harm, your body's going into that fight or flight response. And so that's that shaking, the increased heart rate, all of this is adrenaline. They're going through your body. So your body's preparing to go into fight or flight mode. So there's all of these chemical processes that are happening. Uh, blood is moving away from non-vital organs to vital organs. Your vision changes, your hearing changes. Uh, I mean, it's amazing, all of the different changes that occur in our body when we go into fight or flight. So, but it can be unsettling of like, oh my gosh, I'm shaking, or I feel like I'm hyperventilating, or I'm having a panic attack, these kinds of things. But that's why. And often, and frankly, it can be a little challenging. It can take time for that to pass. And during that time, creating as much or cultivating as much safety as you possibly can in your life. So again, what we're doing here is, if a person's in a fight or flight response, the opposite of that is what's called the rest and digest mode. So there's two different types of um, kind of nervous system responses. You have what's known as your sympathetic nervous system, and then your parasympathetic nervous system. And your sympathetic nervous system, it it feels like, think about it, it feels for you. It's on your side. It's trying to help you. And that's that fight or flight. Okay. And the parasympathetic is that rest and digest. And when we shift into that mode, that's when we start unwinding, and our breathing gets slower, our heart rate drops, our blood pressure begins to slow down and decrease. We're able And we can only really feel that way once we get to safety. Unfortunately, because we live in a modern world, so our threats are very different. They're not Oftentimes they're not as concrete as seeing a tiger and realizing, oh yeah, tiger equals danger. Sometimes it can be, oh, I've got to give a presentation at work. Ah, and it's that same kind of feeling. So what we find threatening is different, um, but our responses are very much the same. And so being aware of that, of, okay, this is what's happening right now to your body, and this is what this rest and digest period looks like. It only happens when we're able to find safety. And so understanding there's a lot of importance there for you to cultivate safety in your life. So um thinking about, okay, well, what would this look like? So in your situation, it might be changing the locks on your doors if you haven't already, which I would strongly encourage everybody to do. If anybody problematic, if, yeah, especially if anybody problematic has or had a key to your house, changing the locks or getting them rekeyed, possibly getting a camera on your car, like a front and back dash cam, or cameras around your house. Um, Making sure your cell phone is charged. Um, Getting some maybe like motion activated lights on the outside of your house. Thinking about things of what can help you to breathe a little bit easier. For some people, it might mean going as far as moving to a different city, or changing your name. So it depends on the degree of, um, mm, I was going to say it depends on the degree of danger you're in, but that's not true. Sometimes it depends on what you feel that you need to do in order to have peace. So again, I wouldn't wait until something's a concrete problem, because often by then it can be too late. If you're constantly feeling like you're watching over your shoulder and that you're living in fear, you know, then I know it can be expensive and it's not right and it's not fair, but sometimes moving to a different area, it gives you a tremendous amount of peace where you're like, man, it's so nice to not have to worry about running into this person in the store or at the gas station, or, uh, you know, what have you, and just really limiting contact. Okay, let me scroll up here. Mm, oh, I guess I'm missing all the fun with the trolls. Critical Mass says, "Oh, the trolls are out in full force tonight." Oh, bummer. Yeah, I think there's lots of people with lots of time on their hands with quarantine. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll, scroll, scroll. Okay, this is a great question. Gits Das asks, "Hey Dana, how do we make sure we're not going insane with narcissistic parents?" Okay, so that's a great question. It's a big question, and it's an even bigger answer. So I'm going to try to make this as concise as I possibly can. But we talk a lot about self care on on these live streams and on this channel, and so thinking about thinking about self care of, okay, and a big part of self-care is realizing, okay, what do you have control over and what do you not have control over? That is a lot harder to do than it may sound, but just that alone will take a lot of weight off of your back, because we can only take action off of what we have control over. We can't control other people. We can only control our response to them. So if you have narcissistic parents or just difficult people in general that are family members or that are in your life, then thinking about, okay, what are some ways that you can carve out sanity, safety and sanity, and making that a top priority. Your safety and your sanity matter. Physical safety, emotional sanity. Those are absolutely worthy of being top priorities. When a lot of people think about self-care, they think about they think about it in kind of a disconnected way of like, oh, taking a bubble bath, or going for a run, or I don't know, whatever, taking some time and cooking a new recipe, or painting, or whatever it might be for them. Those are all wonderful things, but I would encourage you to also expand your understanding and your application of self-care, thinking about it in terms of a impairment prevention plan. So when you think about it that way, it's kind of a game changer. So thinking about, okay, impairment prevention plan, what do you need to do to kind of guard your safety and your sanity so that you can function and be a happy, healthy, well-adjusted human being? What needs to happen in order uh, for you to have that in your life? And that's not asking too much. That's not some far out request or unobtainable. So really thinking about that. Boundaries, setting boundaries with people falls under self-care, definitely falls under that impairment prevention plan. Learning to say no is part of that. Uh, knowing uh, knowing when to get some distance, and kind of picking and choosing your battles. If you have a difficult person in your life, if you've already tried communicating to them, hey, I don't like being treated this way. Yeah, it's not okay for you to yell at me. It's not okay for you to put me down. That hurts my feelings. That's, you know what I mean? If you're having to explain the basics of adult behavior to another adult, then communication isn't the issue. So stop trying to communicate with them. They know. They know. They don't care. The issue is they don't care. So, um, so taking that into consideration, hold on just a second. I forgot to turn off the heater. Oh, shoot. And it's going to be loud. Okay. So hopefully somebody can get that in the very near future here. So, okay. What were we talking about? Impairment prevention plans. So, thinking about if communication is not the issue, if this is not the problem, then what can you do to keep yourself safe and sane? It's going to be picking and choosing your battles. It's going to be just deciding that you're not going to engage in certain conversations. It's going to be just getting some distance. So if this person is really just unrelenting and they're wanting to fight with you, you're feeling the need to defend every single decision you make, all of this, using them using anticipation when it comes to these things. So like, okay, this person is just, man, they just want to fight, they just want to do all these things. I need to be able to get up and get away. So maybe that's going to be going to the bathroom, where you can just close the door and just have some time to, just splash some water on your face and take some deep breaths. It might mean picking up a hobby that gets you out of the house. So maybe bike riding or going for a long walk or distance running. Um, really just kind of limiting the amount of time that you have with them, and being very mindful of the conversations that you're allowing yourself to engage with, and realizing that just because somebody asks you a question or that they want to have a certain conversation with you doesn't mean that you have to comply. It's completely okay for you to be like, you know, basically that you don't want to have this conversation. They might want to argue that point, and it might not be any value to be assertive with them, because again, communication's not the issue here. The issue is they have no respect for your boundaries. So um, it might just doing whatever you need to do to get some sanity back in your life. It might be saying you've got a headache and need to go lie down. It might be that you've got to uh, that you're just really tired, or that you have to go, or that you're not feeling well, whatever it might be. So yes, that's it. I think the dynamic with parents is one of the ones that is the most difficult. And no matter how kind of well adjusted and grounded a person, emotionally, adept and mature a person thinks that they are, I tell you, there's nothing that's activating than spending time with your parents. Like it's that way, I think, for everybody, because those relationships, those dynamics are so old and there's so much there. And that's the case even with a reasonably functional family. And it's 1,000 times worse with a deeply dysfunctional family. So I guess just kind of um, realizing that. Oh gosh. UNA says, it's odd how self-care is not always easy. One top priority for me is making sure my house is clean in case I die and someone discovers my body. But yet I let my hair get super tangled. LOL. Oh my gosh. It's isn't it funny, the weird things that we can think about? Uh, to back up, it is interesting how self-care is not always easy, and it's a tragedy, and probably one of the greatest failings of the modern day school system, that it's not taught. It's not taught. And in some professions, the there's a lot of kind of value assigned to lack of self-care. Of, oh yeah, I'm working 120 hours this week, and man, I haven't eaten all day, and it's 9 o'clock at night. Or yeah, I haven't had a break. And it's sort of just this, who can out-martyr themselves, who can work harder and faster than the next person. And that's no life. That's no life. So it's important that we take care of ourselves and know when too much is too much. And I think, unfortunately, for the vast majority of people, it's because this isn't taught, and uh, we struggle with knowing when enough is enough. And it takes getting to that point of having close to having a nervous breakdown when we're forced to take a break and reevaluate and do things differently. So, um, it's, yeah, it's a problem. But yeah, thinking about, I guess, realizing that you have value, and that it's completely reasonable and appropriate to treat yourself with value, and to that self-care is important. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Just like brushing your teeth is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And your sanity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Your physical safety, your physical health is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And especially in the times that we're living in right now with, um, with COVID and everything else. There's a lot of people that are really struggling with significant anxiety for a wide variety of reasons. But it's important to realize that while we can do all of the things that we're doing, washing our hands, wearing masks, social distancing, all of that stuff, that a big part of staying healthy, flu, COVID, anything in general, is increasing um, enhancing our immune system to the best of our ability. And that goes beyond just eating, uh, you know, healthy, like kind of whole foods. It also has a lot to do with reducing stress. So one of the best things that you can do for your health across the board is to reduce stress. And one of the best ways to go about doing that is through rest, that whole engaging that parasympathetic nervous system. It's that rest and digest mode, rest and relaxation, and having fun. Allowing yourself to have fun. Fun, again, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. It really is. It does wonders for a person's state of mind. And um, yeah, and somehow all of that just gets lost. Yep. Bricks and Feathers says, yeah, Dana, for so many of us, this Western culture is tough it out, hustle culture. I did it for years until I almost had a breakdown. Yep. There's a lot of people, you know, that that are in that mode, that are in fifth gear, and it's all about, okay, gotta move, gotta do more faster, go go go, can't say no. um, Especially if you add in like people pleasing behavior to that, if you add in really struggling with knowing where your boundaries are and when they've been crossed in more subtle ways, it's a recipe for disaster. So, being aware of, yes, what are the signs for you? When do you have too much going on? When do you need to take a break? And what do you need in order to kind of have to take care of yourself, to have that impairment prevention plan? For some people, the signs that there's too much going on in their life, things get messy. Their external environment begins to reflect their internal environment. Their car's a mess, their house is a mess, their cabinets are a mess, their finances are a mess. Um, you know, uh, but different people are different. For some people, it might be they can't keep up with what they have. They're having to, they're continually canceling or rescheduling, or they're chronically forgetting things, or they're late all the time because they just have too much. And doing less is is very frowned upon in kind of those hustle type cultures, but it has great value. Um, Huffle Mom says, we've agreed to let my mother-in-law pay for a sturdier shed in our backyard. She wants to come look at the possible site, and I said she could, but I'm really nervous about it. Thoughts? Sure. Well, so my thoughts on that would be for you to get clear on what it is about that situation that you're nervous about. So pinpointing that, kind of putting a face to that monster. What about this situation is making you the most nervous? Is it snarky comments she might say? Is it her kind of potentially wanting to control the situation? Is it the money situation or feeling indebted to her, of her having control that you don't want her to have? You all of the above. I would encourage you to write it all down of what is, so you can untangle it. What is concerning to you about the situation? And once you start untangling it, then you can address it point by point. So if it's, okay, I'm really concerned, that she's going to make snarky comments, or um, that she's going to treat you and Jack. Uh, she's going to be very belittling or condescending. So, okay, She might be belittling or condescending. So then anticipating, yeah, okay, she's been like that in the past. So if she does make some sort of comments, then thinking ahead of time, okay, what can you say to that? That'll kind of take the wind out of those sails. And coming up with a response so you're not so knocked off guard if she does it in person. I would encourage you to write out a few different ones. So you just kind of have them in your back, you know what I mean? Like have them in your mental back pocket. Um, if it's the money thing, then getting it in writing or letting her know. We'll just call her Jane, saying, Jane, um, we really appreciate this offer for you to buy this shed. However, we're concerned, money between family, those things, those situations never tend to go well. And we don't want this to be one of those situations. And, um, okay. So Huffle Mom says, I'm worried that she'll make comments about the state of our yard and Jack will be upset by it. Okay. So with that said, then you could uh, you could start off by bringing it up. So I don't know the state of the yard or if it's normally like that or to what level we're talking about here, but as you're going out into the backyard, just address the elephant in the room. Gosh, yes, oh Jane, um, you know, uh, I'm hesitant to even bring you back here because the yard is a mess. Jack and I have been so busy with the kids and with everything else, and frankly, we've been overwhelmed. So, um, you know, we know the state that it's in, and we know that we need to, we're doing the best we can right now with it. Once you've addressed it and owned it, then it takes the wind. What is she going to say? You know? And if there's truth in it, that um okay, Huffle was saying, oh wait, I'm sorry. You're talking to somebody else here in the chat. Yeah, this is good advice. Recovering Soul says, yeah, don't let the mother-in-law inside the house. Keep the visit brief. Yes. So using that level of anticipation of if she's going to be very hypercritical of everything, um, if she's going to come over, make it to where you let her know ahead of time. Oh, sure. I would love to walk the yard with you. You know what? I've really got to run. Wish I could stay and chat. Like, I can't today. I have, uh, you know, I've, I've got to go. She doesn't need to know that you've got to go just drive around the block like, and decompress. She doesn't need to know all that. So thinking about ways that you can kind of limit her time there. So where you're cutting off the visit, you're not waiting until she's ready to leave. Huffle says, okay, so mother-in-law, I'm hesitant to bring you back here because we still have a busted up chair and some other junk back here, and we haven't had any opportunity to dispose of it yet. Does that sound good? Yeah. Yep. Exactly that. I just own it. You know, you guys know it's junk. It's there. It hasn't been a priority for whatever reason. And, as long as it's not a health and safety issue and, then it's your property. It's on your time frame. And so if she says something, um, if she says something to you, I would just would encourage you to just own it. Okay, so Jack says, yeah, my concern is that Huffle Mom pruned our grapevine and the vines aren't cleared away. So, okay, so let's go through that scenario. So let's say mom walks back there. Oh my goodness, what are all of these dead grapevines just doing all over the yard? You know, uh, then you just own it. Yep, haven't made it a priority yet. Haven't cleared them away yet. Might do it this weekend, might do it next. Tough to say. I'm not obviously I'm not losing sleep over it, or if she's like, "Well, that just looks horrible and you just need to do that." And y- oh yeah, boy, yeah, yeah. Those sure are some dead grapevines. Yep. Yep, sure does. Just let it roll off your back, like water off of the back of a duck, kind of a thing. It's junk, it's dead stuff. It needs to be thrown away. You know this. I know this. She knows this. You'll get to it when you get to it. And if you don't, and if it keeps piling up, then code enforcement will get to it, you know? But it's your space and it's your right to have certain things be a priority and other things to not be a priority. Or you could try to use some humor about it. So let's say she comes into your backyard and she's like, "Oh, I can't believe the two of you haven't picked up these grapevines yet. And what are you thinking? And oh, this chair and all this junk back here. Oh my goodness." Da, 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 da." And just say, "Oh, well, mom, we thought that's why you were coming over. We got some trash bags and a pair of gloves right over here. You have some time this afternoon?" And just trying to make light of it. That's the other option. So, okay, let's see. Let's scroll up. Or depending on how old your kids are, you know, you guys could make it into a game of, okay, everybody, we're gonna set a timer for 20 minutes. Grandma's coming over. We all know how grandma is. We're going to speed clean the backyard, or you pick an area of the house. We're going to set a timer, and whoever, I don't know, make it fun. Whoever sacks up the most trash gets to decide what we're having for dinner. Something like that. Yeah. And this is true. And you and I says, yeah, you don't need to absorb others' criticisms. Oh, Jack says, yeah, he says, oh no, hell no. Asking her to work, that would be like lighting the backyard on fire. The kids are 18 and 13. They can help. Yes. Yeah. I mean, you're an adult. You're an adult. You might be her child, but you're an adult. And you know, you've got your own family, all of that. She's going to have her opinion and it's going to be different from yours um, you know, I just would think of some responses. She just says, "Well, this is just looks so junky and da 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 da." Think, "Oh, well, mom, you know what? We really thought about it and we just decided, um, we had to fire the lawn man. We also had to fire the maid and the butler. It just, good help is so hard to find." You know what I mean? Just kind of roll with it. Or you could say, Um, oh yes, well, you see, we're being very strategic about this junk in the backyard. We don't want people. We're hoping that a family of possums are going to build a home under it. It's little Jimmy's science project. Just some thoughts. Yeah, right. And Grace says, yeah, if you really want my yard clean, you're welcome to do it. Yeah, yeah. And that might be the best way. Oh, well, geez, mom, if it bothers you that much, there's a rake and some gloves in the garage. Knock yourself out. We're going to the gym. We'll see you later. Elizabeth says someone is always suspicious of me, projecting or simple insecurity. It's exhausting. Well, it's hard to say, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. And so just kind of like the criticisms that Jack and Hufflemom are on the receiving end of, you don't have to own that. So if somebody else has an issue with you, you don't need to make it your issue. If they're jealous of you, if they're suspicious of you, if um, they don't like the way that you do certain things, unless they're signing your paycheck, they don't they really don't get a vote. So I wouldn't I would encourage you to not take that on as a problem that you need to fix. Because who knows? I mean, it could be mental illness, it could be personality disordered stuff, it could be medication they're taking, it could be that you remind them of their, I don't know, best friend from 3rd grade who stole their lunch money. Who knows? It's not something that you need to figure out or that you need to walk on eggshells. Just be yourself and don't own that kind of behavior. Okay, let me scroll up here. Yeah. Gitsdas says, I've learned it's wise to keep patience, but I understand how insanely difficult it is to have patience when your blood is boiling inside. That's what's driving me crazy as well. Yes. Practicing these skills of patience, of assertive communication, kind of these higher level skills is frankly, I mean, it's almost next to impossible with deeply dysfunctional family. It's kinda like if a firefighter, um, or like an EMT, a paramedic, if somebody's gonna learn the skill like life-saving skills, it's akin to dropping them off into the middle of a battlefield and being like, "Okay, well, you saw a few videos on, how to handle wounds, and go have at it." Like, that no, that's getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. It's a lot easier to have skills and practice them in a controlled, safe environment until we learn what we're doing, to then we can actually use them in the kind of the most stressful of stressful situations. So trying to go about it with learning and applying these skills, the hard, in like the most stressful situations is a very difficult, stressful way to do it. And it's like I said, it's frankly, it's next to impossible because your blood is just going to instantly boil. Because that dynamic, that parent child dynamic, and when it's deeply dysfunctional, there is so much there. It's going to be, odds are, and you found this already, it's so much easier to be assertive and to have boundaries with people where there isn't this kind of power dynamic at play, or that you're not emotionally invested in the outcome. If you have the first date with somebody and they're absolutely not your type at all, or they're just flat out horrific, it's a lot easier to not go on a second date with them, versus standing your ground and um, being assertive with your parents. So this is why I would encourage you to think about kind of carving out these little islands of sanity as much as you can, as often as you can in your life, and thinking about, okay, what would this look like? Anticipation is huge when you're dealing with a dysfunctional situation, deeply dysfunctional, or just difficult people in general. Of, okay, what are you walking into? This isn't your first time around this mountain. You've been living with this your whole life. You know these people. So it one of the biggest uh, skills on top of anticipation is seeing reality for what it is and to stop expecting it to be any different. And again, that's easier said than done. It's easier said than done. So, and it can, frankly, it can take years, if not decades, to to like even get a solid grasp on that. But realizing um, when we're feeling frustrated or when our blood is boiling, a lot of times, especially with people that we know are difficult, uh, it's because we keep expecting them to behave differently. And because of that, we keep getting knocked off guard. So if you know, well, gosh, mom always yells, she's always criticizing me, she's criticizing my girlfriend or my boyfriend or my choices in life or the clothes I wear or my appearance or whatever. This is what she does. And so expect that. Expect that. And then if she doesn't do that, then be surprised. And part of anticipating that, of yeah, totally, I know what I'm walking into. It's family dinner. Maybe dad's going to be drunk, mom's going to be screaming, they're going to be screaming at each other. Um, it's going to be really embarrassing that if they're being mean to me about my choices in life or whatnot. Okay, this is what you're walking into. This is probably how it's going to all go down, and then anticipate. So then what can you do about it? You don't need to sit there and stay there until things get so bad that your blood is boiling. Finding ways to get up and leave before that point is key to your safety and sanity. So let's say if it's holiday dinner, um, or a meeting with your parents. I'm not sure how old you are, if you live at home, or kind of what the dynamic is. But if you don't live at home, um, then being like, okay, don't have holiday dinners or holidays at your house because you can't leave. Like you're the one hosting the insanity. So have somebody else host these events. Have the holidays at their house. Have them at a restaurant. Have them or only have part of it at your house. Oh, we're just gonna do dessert this year. Oh, Christmas dinner. Oh, that's going to be pizza. Like, and it'll be here by the time you get here. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, you got to figure out what works for you, and in a way to kind of to get away from the madness. So if get-togethers are at somebody else's house, then you can leave. That's what you do have control over. It's a heck of a lot harder to get other people to leave your house. It's a lot easier to 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 leave 45 minutes into something. You've stayed, you've had you've eaten, and uh, everybody's still on good terms or reasonable terms. You know what I mean? Things are just starting to get a little spicy, and you're like, yeah, I gotta go. Gotta go. Gotta go find something to do other than here. Then you go. Then you go. So that's huge. Realizing, especially if you're an adult, um, and if you have that, I mean, again, I don't, culture I know plays into it. I don't know where in the world you are or what the dynamic is or your age or any of that. But um, if you have some degree of autonomy, I would use it. Use it. And it's amazing. It's amazing, especially again, that parent-child dynamic, those expectations and obligations of family. That stuff is just so ridiculous. Or like and everybody repeats it every holiday, right? It's sort of like, okay, this is what we do. Oh, little Johnny, we want you to come spend the holidays with us. Come stay with us a week, 2 weeks, a month, come stay with us. And then, as a child, you're like, okay, I feel obligated. I don't see my parents that often. I'm gonna fly in and I'm gonna, I guess I'll say that makes the most sense, right? It's more affordable, plane ride wise, and all of that. And I can take the time, and I can take the time off work, especially now with the pandemic. So I guess I should. This is what a good son or daughter would do, right? And then you get there, and then about 36 hours in, you're like, What did I do? What was I thinking?" And it's then the mayhem is unleashed, and you're like, "Okay, I gotta," and then what do? Like, you start drinking, you start smoking, you know, you're climbing the walls 'cause it's miserable. It doesn't have to be like that. Knowing your limits is huge. Your parents want you to come stay for a week over the holidays, but God, 36 hours, that's more than enough. Okay. Maybe you don't see your parents that often because they live far away. Well, okay, then maybe you stay at a hotel or an Airbnb. Or if you're gonna, if you figure it out, you reverse engineer it. You figure out what you need to do in order to stay safe and sane, then you reverse engineer it so that that happens. And you make that a priority because doing anything less is insanity. It truly is. And that doesn't need to happen. And if other people don't agree with it, well, then so be it. They don't get a vote. Like, this is what you need to do for your safety and sanity. It's along the lines, think of it this way, like, your emotional sanity, again, it's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And for somebody to try to debate that point with you, if you're like, "You know what? This is what I need." Your boundaries are to your emotional health like insulin is to a type 1 diabetic. It's non-negotiable. Okay, you need it to live. So, it doesn't matter if, Aunt Sarah doesn't believe in medicine and thinks, "Oh, I really don't think you need insulin." Or Uncle Jimbo is saying, "Oh, that insulin's too expensive. I really think you should just water it down. You'll be fine." Or other people have opinions. "Oh, I just, you really the pharmaceutical companies, there's this massive conspiracy theory. You probably don't even have diabetes." Or, "You know what? We don't believe in science in this family, so we're not comfortable with you having insulin. You know what? Nobody in the history of this family, my father and my father's father before me, none of us took insulin, and we don't think you should take insulin either." Do you see how ridiculous that sounds if a person's a diabetic? Nobody would ever say that. But it's said in many different ways when it comes to boundaries. But it's as boundaries are as just as important and necessary to life as insulin to a type 1 diabetic. So think of it that way. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Yeah, Recovering Soul says, I stopped celebrating all holidays 7 years ago. Without my children, I saw no point in celebrating anything. Lack of money, stress reduction was immediate. Not even birthdays, a lot cheaper too. So, yeah, it's reverse engineering it where you're like, you know what? These are certain things that um, I want to do, and these are certain things that I don't want to do. And, you know, you don't have to go deep into debt. I would encourage people to not go deep into debt, to not go into debt at all, frankly, for for Christmas or any holidays. It's ridiculous. And just because that's the way it's always been. Oh, well, we've got 30 cousins in this family and everybody buys gifts for everybody else, and that's just how it is. Or I don't know. We're so used to spending, thousands upon thousands of dollars on gifts, and that's just how it is. And then it takes us 8 months to pay off the credit card. If that's not okay with you, and if it's causing you tremendous amounts of stress and it's impacting Christmas is one day. It's one day a year. If it's causing you stress for more than one day a year, then it's not worth it. If it's causing you to have to work overtime and just to if it's taking a toll on your marriage and um, you know, you're raising entitled little monsters that expect to have, you know, everything handed to them at Christmas, then I think it's time to sit down and kind of get some priorities in order and reshuffle things and figure out what are our priorities in life. And at the same time, for some people, they absolutely love Christmas and they're like, man, totally okay with that. Really just love digging a big hole of debt like every holiday. That's their thing. Whatever. That's fine. That's your choice. You do you, but you consciously, I guess is the key word there. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up. Um, Jack is talking about his physical therapist connecting him up to the TENS, the electrical stimulation machine to curb chronic pain. How is that working for you? And did you know that you can get those machines on Amazon for like $60? I was just looking at them the other day. We used to have, I don't know if I told you guys this or not. We used to have one of those machines when I guess I was a teenager. My brother was really into, well, he still is, really into Bruce Lee and had read somewhere that like Bruce Lee would use one of those electrical muscle stimulators to do sit-ups because it can, if you crank them way up and uh, it's like the equivalent of doing 10,000 sit-ups in 20 minutes or something. And so he was so excited for this machine and we finally got it in the mail. And when you really crank it up, I mean, it hurts. Like, it really hurts. And we would have so much fun with that, chasing each other around the house and seeing, like, who could handle the pain the longest. It was ridiculous. But when it's used appropriately, I've heard a lot of people say that it provides wonderful pain relief. Okay, let me scroll, scroll, scroll. Okay, Gitsdas says, "I'm from India and I stay at home with my parents." Yes, and so then there definitely is that cultural component to it and that added challenge. Is is it common practice to live at home with your parents until you're married, or how long, um, kind of what's your time frame looking like? Oh, that's terrible. Yeah, Critical Mass was saying, yeah, it's like a taser almost. It really is. And then Candy's saying, "I was tortured with a TENS machine as a child. It was when I was in daycare, and some people took me and used it on me. It caused me so much pain that I passed out." Oh, that's horrible. That's horrible. That, you can, um, they have different settings. So it doesn't have to be like that strong of a zap to where it really shouldn't be to the point where it's painful. Um, let me scroll up here. I'm scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. Hold on just a second. UNA says, holiday dinners. Holiday dinners were always at my house. They refused restaurants. I was crazy. LOL. Yeah, nowhere to run. And I guess here's the thing is they don't get a vote. So like you're not doing you know what I mean? Like if you're not doing holiday dinner, you just let people know I'm not doing holiday dinner. It's too much for me. It's just too much. And if they're like, well, we're not going to meet you at a restaurant. Okay, well, I guess I'll see you next year. Like, not doing holiday dinner at my house. So we're gonna this is what we are gonna do. If you want to join, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. Or we can do dessert and coffee at my house. Or you figure out kind of where your boundary is with that. But um, if other people like, well, we really want, a 5-course meal, and we just really love we just love coming over here and making you cook all day and then eating this delicious food and making your life miserable. It's like, well, of course you do. Of course you do. But you don't get to do that and you don't get to decide that. Uh, right, right. And Jack was saying, yeah, Dana, you do not have to set the stimulator device to where you feel pain. That's definitely not the idea. Yes. Yes, I agree. Uh, Interesting. Namaste asks, I wonder, have you ever worked with Russians as a therapist? Um, it's just that I'm Russian, and I wonder if Russians stand out in some way on a field of mental health problems or stand out in general. I've heard somewhere that Russia acts like it has a BPD. I have not. I don't know if I've ever worked with a Russian in all of my time working in mental health. Um, I've worked with, trying to think, I mean, a handful, maybe 3, like Eastern European people. But that's, expanding uh, kind of what you're saying. I I don't know of any kind of generalizations or ways that um, Russians in particular would stand out. And this is, because my experience is really limited in that way. Um, I can just kind of speak from my very limited experience, and that would be that I think there tends, in terms of cultural differences between Americans and Europeans, but especially kind of Eastern Europeans, uh, there tend Europeans in general, there tend to be more of a directness um, and frankness in communication, where I think Americans tend to kind of dance around topics and they're more vague. Um, yeah. So I guess Eastern Europeans tend to they're quick to call a spade kind of a thing. And it can come across as more brashness, but I th- I don't know. I most most of the time whenever there's different cultures, um different culture or different cultural components at play, um there is, um I would say most mental health practitioners kind of proceed with caution of, okay, well, what am I seeing here? Like, how much is culture playing into this? Um, because it's a totally different understanding of the dynamic. So what an American might consider, oh, well, that's really enabling somebody, right? Like in Gitstas's situation, okay, lives at home in India, or maybe if a person's an Italian, lives at home and maybe until they're married and they're 40 years old. By more Western culture, that might be seen as enabling or very dependent, or um, kind of inappropriate or unhealthy boundaries, these kinds of things. So all of that plays into kind of an overall like assessment of the situation, and it can be difficult for an outsider to uh, kind of learn all about that and to take that into consideration. I guess with that said, um, and I wouldn't say this is, again, my experience with Russians is pretty much, I mean, very limited to basically non-existent. Um, in terms of mental health problems, kind of there's some universal themes that I think are present in certain cultures with how, in terms of like social support, communication, um, or lack of communication, these kinds of things that you can see issues in a person. So regardless of whether or not this is a cultural thing, there tends to be there can be similar issues. So for example, if a person's coming from a culture where there does tend to be a really strong family support system in place, whether or not it's how, dysfunctional or functional, if there's a lot of family involved, then there's going to probably be less issues with isolation, or potentially depression, or you know um, those kinds of feelings. If there's a culture where it's very much um, you know uh, you do a very kind of dictator, kind of dogmatic, you you just, this is what you do, this is your role in society, this is your role as a woman, or this is your role as a man, and this is um, or as a husband or as a wife or what have you. And it's the very kind of an identity foreclosure of sorts, of this is what you're born into and this is what you will become. Then that ideology tends to lead the way to anxiety and depression, and um, all kinds of other issues. So does that answer your question? Mm, let's see, let me scroll up. Bricks and Feathers is saying there's a marriage and family textbook about cultural influences by Monica McGoldrick. Yeah, and here's the thing too with cultural is, I think it's important to be aware that different cultures exist, and that there's just different ways of doing things in the world, right? Like, especially for Americans, because this is such a big country that it's not like Europe where people can easily and tend to travel between different countries and be exposed to different ways of doing things. So there's kind of this due to the physicality of the United States, it kind of leads to this level of ethnocentrism, of our way is the only way, our way is the best way. And that's a problem when you're working with people from other cultures. But the added problem with that is kind of with understanding cultural sensitivity of of not making it into like a stereotype, like, oh, well, all Italians and Mexicans are Catholic and have big families and don't believe in birth control and, like, and are good cooks and all of this. Like, no, there might be there might be some truth to that, but it's a stereotype. And it's not always true. Like, there are people in Italy that are Black or that are Jewish or that don't like to cook or that, you know, don't wanna have kids, or do you see what I'm saying? So that's kind of the downside, I think, to a lot of, like, the cultural awareness thing is it just broad brushes of, yes, this is how people are in India, or this is how people are in Italy or wherever, and, um, that may or may not be accurate for like the individual that you're y- you know that's in front of you. So okay, let's see, let me scroll. mm. Gitstas says, yeah, we have to stay till we're married. I was away for 10 years while I was studying and working. I wasn't given electricity to study. Now because of COVID I'm back here. Oh boy. Do you, I guess, kind of working within the parameters of your situation, what are some things that you think you could do to carve out some safety and sanity into your day, and ideally into your week and then into your month and so on? I know it's a challenge, especially with COVID and kind of the need to social distance and not be out of the house so much. But is there, even if it's um, putting in headphones or um, y- something like that, where you can just kind of drown the world out and in an uninterrupted way? UNA says, "Oh, I didn't live alone, so the decision for holiday dinners wasn't mine. I had no choice in the matter." Yeah, I guess here's my 2 cents about that, is if we're talking about a significant, well, even if we're I was gonna say, if we're talking about a significant other, then in my book, it is 50% your decision. And frankly, there's a saying out there in terms of the law, although this isn't like the law, but the most restrictive restriction restricts you, is the saying. And that means that kind of trumps everything. That wins. So the most restrictive restriction restricts you. So for example, if you're wanting, just follow me here. Just go with this. So for example, if you're wanting to build a house, but the zoning restriction says that it has to be over 2,000 square feet, well, then that's the restriction. That's the most restrictive restriction, and it's going to restrict you. It doesn't matter if um, your house is going to have a pool and a 4-car garage, and it's going to be made out of, uh, the finest materials, and it's going to be featured in magazines and all of that. If the most restrictive restriction is in place, then it's going to restrict you. I'm a big fan of kind of that principle in general, especially when it comes to relationships. So if you're in a relationship with somebody, and let's say that that you're, I don't know, there's some sort of real clash of what personalities between your parents or their parents, and they they're the most restrictive restriction there is they're like, you know what, 36 hours. Like, that's my limit. That's what I can take. If we're gonna go visit your family or my family, I can't do more than that. More than that, it's not fun for me at all. And I don't wanna be like, why am I paying to go be miserable? Like, I'm paying to go travel to this place to be miserable for what? Like, we're not nobody's gonna leave with good memories. Like, it's this is insanity. Why are we doing this? If that's the most restrictive restriction, then figuring out a way to work around that. Okay, this is how much this person can handle before they start to crack. So then maybe this means that we need to stay in an Airbnb, or we need to stay in a hotel, or we need to stay maybe the first night or 2 nights at the parents' house, and then the rest of the time in the Airbnb. Or you need to figure out a way to make it work to where that safety, that emotional and physical safety and sanity is in place. Really, truly. If you make that your priority, that's if that's your North Star of your emotional and physical safety and sanity, like that they win. They're the top priority for things. It really helps to dictate and drive the rest of your decisions. And it's amazing um, how tactful and um, uh, frankly, how easy it can really be. It takes time and practice for it to get to the place where it's easy, but it's absolutely doable when you just realize, oh yeah, this is just how it's going to be. How um, people get over it. They get over, and then with family especially, there might be some hurt feelings, there might be some resentment after the first few times of these visits becoming enjoyable and the dynamic radically changing of, oh my gosh, this is actually fun. Then people tend to get over it and they don't have an issue with it. Because then nobody's like, okay, well, we should stay here for Thanksgiving and we should be here for 14 hours because that's what we've always done. And my father, my father before me and my father's father before me, this is what we've always done, kind of a thing. And yeah, we make this 12-course meal and everybody's exhausted and grumpy and tired, and the kids are screaming and, you know, like, and then you've got certain relatives that just get so drunk, they're belligerent and it's no fun. And then everybody gets in a big fight and then everybody goes home. Like, it doesn't have to get to that point. You make it, you decide what outcome you want and then reverse engineer your actions to make sure that that happens. Um, that's an interesting point. Bricks and Feathers was saying to Namaste, I remember listening to a podcast about attachment styles, and only 10% of Russians had a secure attachment style. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I could see that, especially in certain places in the world where there's been a lot of war. And you think about places like Syria or parts of Africa, or well, I mean, just a lot of the world where Middle East, that definitely uh, impacts the culture. If a person grows up in an environment where culturally, like community wise, you know, it's there is no safety. It's constant fight or flight. And you don't know if you're gonna starve. You don't know if you're gonna survive. You don't know if, everything is uncertain. Forget about just a schedule or any type of stability. I mean, you're living from moment to moment, and that definitely impacts a person for the long run. Uh, Oh, Meredith. Okay, Meredith says, I'm currently dealing and recovering from verbal and cell phone harassment and previous stalking. Police listened but couldn't help unless he trespassed. Can you please speak on this? Thank you. This is very difficult. And unfortunately, this is, I think, one of the loopholes when it comes to protecting victims of these types of crimes. And and really the only thing that they can do is basically is file a restraining order. Or if he's on the property, then they can, if you have well, even if you don't have a restraining order, they can generally remove him. Unless he's got some sort of right to be on the property, then that's a whole nother story. But if it's, but unfortunately, waiting for a person to do something as brazen and as boundary busting as breaking into your property or like showing up on your property or doing that kind of stuff, that's, in my opinion, that's waiting till it's too late. But the there's not a lot of laws in place to do anything otherwise. And a restraining order, if a person's kind of that unhinged that they're stalking you, a restraining order, I don't really know how effective that's going to be. So I mean, it's a, kind of a crapshoot, probably 50-50 are your odds that a restraining order is going to do anything. So, in terms of that, then thinking about, okay, uh, what can you do to keep yourself safe? And this is where I would encourage you to get like motion sensor lights, to get the 4K night vision cameras installed around your property, to get front and rear dash cams that are motion activated. So they start recording as soon as there's any, um, you know, uh, sensation done to your car. These kinds of having some sort of protection at multiple places in your house. And we've talked about this before. I keep meaning to bring it down here. I'm a big fan of bear mace. It's illegal in some states, but it's not in others. I don't want, personally, I don't want just regular mace. I want something that's going to drop a charging bear. So some people, I guess the point is, whatever type of protection you have around your house, you want to make sure that it's easily accessible, that it's quick to access, and that you know how to use it and that you're comfortable using it. This is my biggest concern. There's so many people out there, I think women especially, that tend to get some sort of like a gun or um, a knife or a little or even a big can of mace, and they don't know how to use it. And that's it's it just terrifies me because you're putting yourself in harm's way if you're not comfortable, 100% comfortable using it. These kinds of self-protection, it really shouldn't be there in order to try to scare somebody else off, you know? So, and, and it's important if you do have, depending on the kind of protection that you have and you're comfortable using it, to understand like the limits of it. Um, you know, Like, I know people like, "Oh, yeah, I have a gun for protection," and then they have the gun in the safe, and then they have the bullets out of the gun in a different part of the safe, and then they have, a combination to get into the safe, and it's like, okay, I mean, to me, that's kind of a false sense of security. It's a good idea. I'm not advocating having, loaded weapons laying around your house, especially if you have kids, but yeah, what are the odds that that's actually gonna help you, though? So, kind of thinking of different types of protection that you can keep around your house if you need to grab it, and then also too, if things get to the point where you're that concerned for your safety, then maybe it's time to consider moving and getting a post office box and having all of your mail delivered there. Again, I know it's not fair, it's expensive, it's inconvenient, but it is what it is. If you have somebody who's unhinged and obsessive, uh, who's fixated on you, that's a problem. And sometimes we have to take extreme measures to stay safe. So, all right, let me scroll here. Um, let's see. Scrolling here. Darlene, hello. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while. She says, I know PTSD and CPTSD are treatable, but are they curable? That's a great question. And it depends who you ask. And frankly, I think you could ask that of pretty much any mental health condition. So there's, I think there's several different kind of theories about that, where some are, and you could even, you could even extend this and lump addiction into that. So, are certain mental health, or even all mental health disorders, um, curable? There's quite a few. There's a whole camp out there that would say no. That kind of, if you have depression, if you have PTSD, if you have this, that it's definitely treatable, but that it's always going to be with a person to some degree. Then you have other camps of mental health professionals that will say, yeah, absolutely. Like, they are curable. We can get a person back with the right treatment, and of course everybody's different, right? So it's going to depend on a lot of factors. It's going to depend on that person's um, um, kind of level of awareness, their level of insight, their level of motivation, the kind of the social support that they have, their access to care, their compliance with care, their, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of other factors at play, but um, then you've got people that say, yeah, we can absolutely get that person back to where they were before this event. Yeah, it's possible to cure them. And then you've got another camp. This is more of like the positive psychology camp that would say, yeah, it's possible to cure this and to get a person to a point of being even better than they were before. So to far surpass a person's baseline, and to create a really exciting and empowering new level of normal for them. So yeah, um, I'm a big fan of. I don't like I don't like putting limits on, especially on what people are capable of. And the kind of mental health community in general has really come under fire for that. I think that's probably one of the ongoing issues um, with kind of the mental health community, is there is such a huge identity foreclosure that occurs when a person gets a diagnosis. And for like, a diagnosis can provide a lot of clarity for a person of, oh, I have PTSD. Everything makes sense now. All of my behavior, all of the way I've been feeling, this makes sense. Or, oh, being diagnosed with whatever. Like, okay, this makes sense. But what tends to happen, and this is just, I think, the way that the human brain works, and I think also the way that um, kind of the way that diagnoses are um, kind of not explained in context to people, that it really it can feel like a life sentence. And so just having a diagnosis without any context, it for a lot of people it feels hopeless. And then as a result, then people start kind of using that diagnosis as intentionally or not, as kind of an excuse, as kind of this shield as to, well, this is why I act this way. You see, my behavior is very erratic and I have all these mood swings. It's because I have borderline personality disorder. Or, oh, well, um, it's because of XYZ. But then there's no, um, you know, then it's sort of like, well, I guess I don't need, it's a feeling of, well, I don't need to do anything about it, or I'm not going to work to change anything because it's just this diagnosis. It's just what I have. And that's that learned helplessness or like that identity foreclosure. That's what you're dealing with at that point. So, um, I want to say it was in the latest revision of the DSM. I don't, I have to go look, but I know that there was a lot of talk of turning, especially with personality kind of stuff, turning it into instead of like a mm, like a instead of like a personality disorder into more traits. So instead of like a borderline personality disorder, like borderline personality traits, which in many ways is very helpful because there's so much to it. Because then I think you've got clinicians that tend to be very hesitant to give a diagnosis that they might feel is really strong, or they're not certain of, especially like antisocial personality or, um, these kinds of diagnoses that can kind of carry a lot of weight. And they're like, oh, I don't know if I want to, if I want to go on the record saying that with what I know about this person, or you know what I'm saying. So there's a lot of um, there's a lot of challenges there. I remember reading a paper, um, I don't know, about a year or so ago, saying when people the highest rate of uh, I think attempted and completed suicide from people admitted to a psychiatric hospital was at discharge, was when they left. And they had traced it back to that was when they got the diagnosis of, okay, um, this is what's going on with you. You have PTSD, or you have schizophrenia, or bipolar disorder, or some that. I mean, that nobody wants any of that. That feels heavy and it feels overwhelming and it feels uh, hopeless. So that's, I think that's a big barrier to healing, I guess is what I'm saying, is the way that a lot of diagnoses are given. It's just kind of dropped on a person's lap, and that can really feel like a big bomb. It is a big bomb in a person's life when you realize, oh my gosh, this is what's going on. And if it's so I think it's important to have that kind of that discussion handled and approached tactfully and within a way of kind of here's a fuller picture. Here's the possibility. Like lots of people go on to live happy, healthy, well-adjusted lives with PTSD or with schizophrenia or with bipolar disorder or with um, a wide variety, with any personality disorder. Like these are things that are treatable and that are manageable. And so now it's going to be about getting a treatment plan together and kind of circling the wagons and getting it figured out, you know? So yeah, it's yeah. Okay. UNA says, well, Dana, could it also be because when you're being discharged, you feel like you're being tossed away, like no one cares anymore? That could be it. Well, I think in this day and age, especially, I mean, insurance drives treatment, and it dictates it dictates treatment big time. So the result is, it's, I mean, my goodness, the hoops that we would jump through to try to get a person that desperately needed to be hospitalized to find a bed available in a psychiatric hospital, it's a nightmare. So, even finding places that are open, I mean, it's it's sad. It just really shouldn't be this way. So, so you have that, and so finding an open hospital with availability is a challenge, and then um, a lot of insurance will dictate, okay, basically it's get them stabilized and get them out, and the insurance company has a lot of say as to whether or not they think that you're stable or not, and what medications a person should be on. And so then people tend to get discharged from a hospital way sooner than they're ready. And it's not, psychiatric hospitals, it's not as cut and dry as it is with a medical hospital. With a medical hospital, you have more kind of concrete milestones that you can point at and say, okay, yes, this person's on track to recovering, and kind of here's the plan and all this. Psychiatric, I mean, every day is different. Every hour, every minute can be different for a person. And it takes a little while for meds to, you know, um, for a person to become stabilized. And sometimes it's a process. Like certain meds don't work for certain people. And it just, it's a lot. And so I think the result is people tend to leave a lot sooner than they're actually ready. And they may or may not have a solid support system in place, or even if they do have like a network of people, like family and friends around them, they may or may not be supportive. I can't even tell you how many conversations. This is such an ongoing thing, I think, for anybody in mental health, is you have a lot of oftentimes quote unquote supportive people that don't believe in medication, or that don't believe in therapy, or that um, that kind of think, okay, well, kind of good clean living is all that this person needs. And it's just an uphill battle. So I don't know, there's a lot of issues. There's just a lot of issues at play with that. And I would imagine too, for people, especially that don't have a support system, or maybe that, um, there's just so much. So leaving with the diagnosis, um, and then feeling, and again, if a person's leaving with it, it gets diagnosed. If it's not framed in a way that works to address stereotypes and address misconceptions, because a lot of mental health disorders are all full of, I mean, you look at any movie about mental health, and it's insulting, frankly. It's so far away from what, um, I mean, the vast majority of them are so far away from what mental health issues like truly present as. um, it's no wonder, you know what I mean? So a person gets a certain diagnosis and they think, oh my gosh, this is what I know of when it comes to schizophrenia, or this is what I know of when it comes to dissociative identity disorder. And then they panic and they're like, well, what kind of quality of life could I possibly live? My life's over, you know? But a lot of that could have been prevented with just um, some proper information, accurate information. NAMI, the National Organization for, um, what is it, mental illness? Is that right? I think mental illness. They're wonderful. They have, and I would encourage everybody to go to their website. I want to say it's NAMI.org. Let me look it up real quick because it's important. NAMI, National Alliance on Mental Illness. Yes, and it's NAMI, NAMI.org. And they just are wonderful. And it really helps to dispel a lot of inaccurate um, stereotypes and assumptions, and they're all about providing like accurate information and helping people get support and all of that. So, um, let's see. Cecilia mentions, I've been incredibly depressed these past few months, and the only thing really keeping me afloat are my friends, my workout routine, and my cat. Oh my goodness. What, uh, any idea as far as like what's been going on these past couple months? Also, I wanted to mention that there are quite a few resources out there that are free or very low cost. So for for people that are really struggling with depression, um, there's the suicide hotlines, and you don't have to be to the point of being suicidal to call. So feeling incredibly depressed, feeling like you're in a dark place, feeling like um, you just kind of want to fade away, or you just don't care if you wake up. Like these kinds of feelings, consider calling a suicide hotline. They have people there, they can talk or they can text. It's free, generally 24 hours a day. And um, that can be a wonderful resource. There's for people that have struggled with sexual assault, men or women, there's the organization RAIN. Let me pull up their website here. Mm, if I could type correctly here. Okay, it's RAINN.org. And they also have a support line and a chat line, and it's free. And they are full, they have lots of wonderful resources for men and women um, that are struggling, that have been sexually assaulted in any way, shape, or form. So, yeah, wonderful, wonderful site. Trying to think of another. Uh, as far as counseling goes, if I know, especially right now with COVID stuff, there always tends to be like long lines for counseling, and it can be expensive. And then the challenge is getting insurance to cover it, or insurance only wants to cover so many sessions, and on and on. One of the things to consider is to contact your local, uh, 4-year university. So universities that offer master's programs, um, tend to have counseling departments. And the counseling departments tend to have counseling or social work, tend to have counseling or social work or psychology students that are master's level or PhD level, and they have a counseling center. Those tend to be free and open to the public. So, and it's a win-win situation. So, um, you get free counseling, and then the students get the opportunity to learn and to use their skills. So that's something to consider as well. Let's see. Let me scroll. Recovering Soul says those hotline places seem to mostly tell me platitudes. They don't know my personal situation. Mm, that's that's unfortunate. I would hope that they um, wouldn't be saying platitudes at all or trying to cheer people up. That they would be there mainly to listen and uh, to just kind of to be there. Okay, let me scroll up here. Raziel says, what are the signs of female friends that are toxic? Okay. So let's expand that question and talk and take away the gender component to it, and let's just focus on what are the signs that a friendship is toxic for you. Okay, because again, like we were talking about earlier, it's about it's about behaviors and not gender, and and I'm not saying that from some sort of like trying to be politically correct. I'm saying this because it's really important that people see the broader picture of this and realize that problematic behavior is problematic behavior and that it comes in a wide variety of packages. And it's really important to see that, because if we only have our blinders on and we're like, okay, well, I just need to be aware of what like you know toxic female friends look like, or what toxic um dating men look like, then we're only seeing this little sliver in front of us instead of the broader picture. So that's why it's so important. Okay. So thinking about, okay, well then what does toxic behavior in general look like? What are the signs? And kind of like what we were talking about earlier, I would encourage you to take a step back from that, because the signs, the things that you can point to, uh, that can, I did a whole video series about this, but I swear I almost kind of regret that I did, because um, it can cause a lot more confusion than anything. So, because concrete signs can be debated. And then we can get all kinds of dragged off track thinking about, well, but what if it was this person's culture? Or what if they didn't mean this? And what were their intentions? And maybe I misread it, or maybe I took it this way because of my past, or, because I don't having a bad day, or do you see what I'm saying? Like there's a million different ways that whole thing can just get dragged off track. Getting clarity can get dragged off track. So focusing on, okay, how how does it feel? How does toxic behavior feel? Well, toxic behavior feels toxic, right? It literally feels like you're gonna be sick. It feels like it's not good for you. It feels anxiety inducing. You feel anxious, you feel upset, you're thinking about it nonstop. There's a lot of like rehashing of thoughts. You don't feel safe. You start asking yourself, who has the problem? Is it me? Is it them? Is this weird? I'm not sure this is weird. Is this weird to anybody else? You're probably talking to other people. You're asking for advice. Um, right now, right? This tends to be a sign. If something if something is not a problem, it doesn't really capture our attention. Okay. It's when we find ourselves journaling about it, talking to our therapist about it, talking about asking other people, hey, is this a problem? Then yeah, it's a problem. And we don't even need anything concrete about that. We know at a minimum, it's a problem for you. So let's say, for example, if your friend, I don't know, let's just say she did something. Let's say she, I don't know, brought you dinner, okay? And um, you could ask some people, okay, uh, and you felt that you were uncomfortable with this. It just made you uncomfortable. You're like, I don't know why she did this. I kind of feel like it was a weird kind of passive aggressive thing. Um, I wasn't comfortable with her bringing me dinner. Maybe you told her that you didn't want company. that you wanted to be alone, or maybe you told her that you're now vegan and she brings over a pepperoni pizza. Do you see what I'm saying? Other people might debate that. Oh, well, you should be thankful. She was thinking of you. Don't make it into more of a big deal. She was doing a nice thing for you. This is why I'm not a fan of like certain concrete things like this, because then it can be debatable. At the end of the day, if it crossed a boundary with you, then it's an issue. And it's an issue worth addressing in some way, shape, or form. And everybody's boundaries are different. And nobody knows where anybody's boundaries within reason are until they make them known. There's obviously certain boundaries that we would consider within the realm of appropriate adult behavior. And generally, the law, by and large, kind of dictates that as well, right? It's not okay to spit on a person, kick, hit, induce violence, like this kind of stuff. Most people have this understanding down by like first grade. So, normally that kind of stuff doesn't need to be explained to most adults. Um, but outside of that, the little things, everybody's boundaries can be different. You might not have a problem with getting phone calls at midnight. Sometimes I don't even have a problem getting phone calls at midnight, but more often than not, I do. So people know. Well, I just turn off my phone. So like nobody, people know I'll just call you back when I want to call you back. Um, so, but everybody has their boundaries. Some people are fine with people calling them at 3 in the morning and needing to talk or wanting a favor. Some people aren't. They're like, you know what? Um, I've got to get to bed. I've got to wake up tomorrow. I don't do phone calls after 9 o'clock. Some people are fine with loaning money. Some people are not. Some people have, kind of, I don't know, they have more of like a dark sense of humor. Some people don't find that funny at all. Everybody kind of has their own boundaries. So this is where it comes down to getting to know yourself and knowing where your boundaries are, and and being okay with that, getting grounded in that and not getting talked out of it by other people. So, for example, getting talked out of it would be, well, let's say you've got a friend who just has I don't know, a very different sense of humor than you, whatever that might be, just a very different sense of humor than you. And you find it maybe offensive or just off putting or inappropriate. Um, and they tell you jokes that you just don't want to hear. Maybe they're sexist, they're racist, they're just kind of dark, they're disturbing, they're just creepy, whatever it might be. It is not, whatever, not your sense of humor. Okay. Um, it doesn't matter if everybody else in the room finds those kinds of jokes hilarious. If you have an issue with them, then you have an issue with them. They don't get to vote as to whether or not you have an issue with them. So if it's a problem for you, then it's a problem. And that's a boundary cross for you. So it's okay to then either say something, well, ideally say something to that person that, I don't want to hear jokes like that. Like, I don't think it's funny. It's gross. It's not cool. Um, just whatever. Like, I don't want to hear it. And if they keep at it, then you'll have to figure out, okay, this person um, doesn't respect your boundaries. So now what are you going to do? Because now communication isn't the issue. They know that you don't find these kinds of jokes funny, and they don't care. They are gonna keep telling them to you whether or not you like it or not. Maybe they think it's funny to watch you squirm in discomfort. Who knows? But uh, then figuring out, okay, what's the next step? Are you gonna, um, are you gonna stop talking to them? Or are you gonna what are you gonna have to do to kind of get that boundary back into place? And that's going to be a different answer depending on each person and depending on the situation and lots of different factors. So I guess in short, signs of a toxic female friend is the signs of toxic person in general, and it's going to be boundary crossing boundaries with you. And um, everybody's boundaries are different, and it's okay for your boundaries to be different from somebody else's. And if it's a crossed boundary for you, then you know making your safety and your sanity a top priority. Okay, some things have got to change. If a person's asking for too much, or they're being kind of creepy, or their behavior is just off-putting, we can either be assertive and address it, or if you feel like that's just going to make things a heck of a lot worse or potentially put you in danger, then getting some physical distance, or a combination of the two. So it totally depends. Does that help? Let's see. Let me scroll. Raziel says, yeah, an educated empath is a narcissist's worst nightmare. Yeah, in large part. At a minimum, they are very confused when they encounter that, because they're like, this is so strange. You're so nice and you're so considerate and compassionate, and yet you have boundaries and you won't let me drag you through hell with my inappropriate requests and outrageous behavior. It doesn't compute for them, and that's the thing with kind of having empathy. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't mean we have to either have empathy or be aggressive. Like, that middle road is having empathy and having boundaries. And that way you can still care about other people, and you can still be polite, and you can still smile, and you can still be caring, and you can still be giving and do all of these things, but within a way that keeps yourself safe and sane. And that's our boundaries. Okay, let me scroll up here. And I think I'm going to sign off kind of early tonight. I have a long day tomorrow and an early day tomorrow. You know, mm, there is a fantastic book, and I had my notes. I don't think my notes are up on my website. But I should make a point to do that. There's a fantastic book I highly recommend. It's by Patricia Evans. It's called The Verbally Abusive Relationship. And um, it's just wonderful. It's one of those books that really gives a lot of clarity. And in terms of behavior, kind of more of that, what we tend to consider covert behavior, stuff that flies under the radar. Um, that book does a great job of explaining it. So it's, most people tend to think of verbal abuse as um, screaming and yelling and cussing. And the reality is, verbal abuse includes a wide variety of behavior: threatening, intimidating, withdrawing, withholding information, withholding affection, silent treatment. Um, I mean, I'm trying to think. There's just so much. There's so many different types of behavior out there that are what would at first what we would consider to be more covert. But then once you're aware of it, you see it for what it is, and then that's kind of the beauty of it, is it demystifies the whole process. So it turns the situation into, why am I so confused? Why is this person like who has the issue? Is it me or is it them? Once you're able to realize, oh no, this is undermining behavior. Oh, this is invalidating behavior. Oh, this is minimizing behavior. Oh, this is what this is, and you have a word for it, and you realize, no, that's a form of verbal abuse. It's like, oh, well, no wonder I feel like I'm being abused. It's because I am. And then it makes sense. But the challenge with that is other people tend to be walking around thinking, oh, hey, verbal abuse, yelling, screaming, cussing, and maybe really just mean put downs. But anything outside of that, oh, that's just mom being mom, or oh, that's just a person having a bad day, kind of a thing. And it's like, nope, it's falls under the umbrella of verbal abuse. And so so I guess the challenge is kind of getting validation from other people, because if other people are walking around with, well, yeah, here's what verbal abuse looks like. And verbal abuse only looks like that some of the time, but then the other 95% of the time it looks like many other things, then it's hard to get validation from those people because they're operating off of the information that they have, which is really limited. So, um, yes, let me, I don't know. I will try to get that on my website here. I'll try to get something up tomorrow. So if you want to look for it on my website, you can go to thriveafterabuse.com and under like book club, and I'll see about getting those notes up there. So, but I also highly recommend reading that book. It's fantastic. And if you're interested in audiobooks, Audible is one of the like affiliates, I guess, of the show. So you can get a free audiobook if you go to audible.com or use the code Thrive After Abuse, or go to audibletrial.com/Thrive After Abuse. You can also uh, order audiobooks from your local library, and they're free. So that's another thought. Just something to keep in mind if you are an audiobook addict like I am, and you go through them and you don't want to spend thousands of dollars every month on Audible. You can look at your local library. They have apps. It's just so cool. Hoopla is the app that most libraries these days are using, and you can check out all kinds of audiobooks. So Jennifer asked, making fun of a person could be verbal abuse, right? Because you think I shouldn't be so sensitive and laugh at myself, right? Yes. So, um, um, any behavior that's really like considered like diminishing, defining, um, and cruel and unwanted behavior towards another person is considered abuse. So, uh, cruel, biting sarcasm, uh, cruel, quote unquote, humor, mean teasing. When somebody says something hurtful and they follow it up with, oh, I was just joking. Uh, no, you're not. Like, that's called passive aggressive behavior, So a lot of people, being assertive, being direct with things, this stuff's not taught. It's just not taught. And the result is that people, when they don't know how to be assertive, and they don't know how to have boundaries, or when their boundaries are crossed, or how to properly respect the boundaries of others, they do everything but that. And so if they don't know how to be assertive, then then by default, they're going to be either passive or passive aggressive or aggressive. And that's where that crazy making comes in. because it's none of that solutions oriented. It's a power, you're locked into a power struggle at that point with this other person. With a passive person, it oftentimes is this whole game of guess how I'm feeling, or guess what I'm thinking, or guess what issue I have, because they're not going to tell you. And then that can be completely unnerving, and you might not know why. You're like, I feel like I have to walk on eggshells. This person's never yelled at me, but I don't feel like they're being honest. Like, this is the kind of person that they probably have like bodies in their basement. You know what I mean? Like, they're super polite. They always have a nice face, and they're just smiling, and everything is good, and life is good. And oh, just no issues, no issues, none at all. And you just think, oh, yikes, they're not being honest with me or with themselves. Or that passive aggressive person who says everything is fine, and then, uses you as the butt of jokes that you don't find funny, or teases you about things that you don't find funny, or burns your dinner and pretends like it was an accident, or stuff like that. So yeah, there's a wide variety. There's a lot of types of verbal abuse out there. And yeah, getting familiar with what they are, it really brings a lot of clarity about things. Um, yeah. So it can be very validating. The more you learn about this, the more things start to make sense. All right. Craig says, my father loves acting cruel. He says, you're just too sensitive. Quit being a wussy. Yeah. When we were talking about this earlier, Craig, before you got here, about, um, you know, and again, this is easier said than done, but we don't need to take on other people's garbage. And so if somebody's saying something, if they're the kind of the examples used earlier was a person was very suspicious of somebody else, um, and that was really kind of making this other person nervous, because like, I'm not doing anything, but this person always thinks I'm up to no good, and it's like making me really nervous, and what do I do about this? Or if other people have issues with you, we don't have to take that on. That's their issue. So, okay, yeah, he might think that you're um, uh, too sensitive, and that you just need to kind of, stop being a wussy, right? Well, okay, he thinks that, and you think that, um, you think he's a jerk and should quit being a jerk. So, guess we're at an impasse. Like, okay, dad, you think whatever you want to think, but you don't need to own it. You have your own thoughts about his behavior. It's like, well, you're an insensitive a-hole, so here we are, you know? Um, and frankly, you're right. So, because it goes back to what we're talking about, like the kind of the most restrictive restriction restricts you. It doesn't matter if I tell a joke, or tease you, or do something, and I have good intentions, and it does not land well. It Then that's the restriction. I might think it's hilarious. I might think, um, oh, I'm telling you this joke, or I'm teasing. Oh, you know what? I'm teasing you about your ears. Oh, you have big ears. That's so cute. Hope you grow into them. Har, har, har. Which I would never do, because that's not cool and that's really mean. But let's say a person does that and they're totally joking. Oh, they think that's so funny. And you don't. And they just can't see as to why that comedy gold isn't landing the way that they intended. like, this goes back to they're lacking that self-awareness and that kind of emotional intelligence to realize, the world is not just about them. Like, communication isn't s only part of it is about the message that's being put out there. The other part of communication is the message that's being received. If you're saying something, no matter how good your intentions are, if it's coming across the complete opposite way, then you need to change your approach if you wanna have the desired outcome. It's like if a comedian were to get on stage. I mean, can you imagine if a comedian were to get on stage and tell a bunch of jokes and the whole audience isn't laughing and the whole, you know, nobody's laughing. And the comedian's like, "Oh, you guys, you just don't have a sense of humor. Can't possibly be my jokes, right? Not me. It's you. You're the ones with no sense of humor." Okay. Well, you can think that. But your jokes aren't going over well with this crowd. So adjust or get booed off stage. So you don't need to own, don't let anybody else define you, I guess is what I'm saying. If you have your limits as far as what's okay with you and what's not okay with you, and we all do. And when somebody else doesn't seem to be able to get that, realize that's their limitation. They don't understand that. And that's, again, that's a them issue. It's frustrating. Oh, good for you, Monica. Says, "Hey, Dana, I'm celebrating my daughter's birthday alone this year. I'm getting her to celebrate it in school with her friends and playmates. First time away from toxic family." Well, I am thrilled that you are setting some boundaries that you feel are the best for you and your daughter. So, yay, you for that. Oh, well, good, Monica. I'm glad. She says, "Hey, Dana, I just wanted to thank you for your advice after the last session. I feel like I got my wings back. I feel so free now. I was granted a divorce 2 weeks prior, and I was such a mess." Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Boy, I tell you, these deeply, deeply dysfunctional relationships, it's such a period of darkness, and there's so much chaos, and there's so much confusion, and it can be very overwhelming. And there's oftentimes lots of tears and lots of sadness and lots of feelings of hopelessness. Um, and anybody else that's struggling with that, you know, I just would encourage you to keep going, just keep walking and keep doing what you need to do in order to keep yourself safe and sane, and know that you're not alone out there, that there's lots of us that have been through it and that are going through it. And it's just keep walking towards what's keeping you safe and what's keeping you sane, and it's just one foot in front of the other. So, okay, with that said, I think I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. And thank you all so much for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So everybody take care, have a lovely evening, and just lots of love to you. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and just lots of love to you guys.